Hey, they're finally doing something with Yomogi. I just got done with the 8th episode of SSSS.DYNAZENON, and this is my thoughts on the series so far. So this episode opens up with several kids running into what Shizumu calls a failed kaiju. And this kaiju is very small, it's very decrepit, and it seems to be wandering around and just coloring things random colors. And even so, Goma, he ends up stumbling upon Goma and colors Goma's face with this color. And while the group decides to go find this kaiju to defeat it, they end up discovering it and it being very, very small. And even though Goma immediately was going to go kill the thing, everybody seems to have this feeling of, well, it hasn't done anything bad. Should we even kill it? It's not that it's dangerous or anything. And so this kind of creates this conundrum of, like, the aspect of, are all kaiju, worthy to be killed instantly, or do they need to be guilty of something before they're actually charged, essentially death? But, yeah, even though Knight shows up and says, we need to get rid of this thing immediately, they're like, no, we're gonna take care of it. Goma just steps up and says, no, I'll keep an eye on it. We'll wait to see if it does anything bad before we do anything. So Knight's like, strangely enough, Knight seems to be okay with that. It was kind of funny because during this whole kind of exchange with the characters, not when Knight was there, but the team themselves, the Dynazenon team, they decided they were going to try to, Goma decides that he was going to try to do his domination, his instance domination on the actual kaiju to see if he can control it, because he used to be a kaiju controller. At least that's what he claims, and that's what the eugenicists claim. And he fails. And then Chisei steps up and she tries to do it. And then Koyomi steps up and he tries to do it. And then even though Yomogi's like, no, I ain't going to do it, Yume decides to do it, and that kind of leads him into wanting to do it. And while everybody fails, Yomogi's the only one that seems to have some kind of effect. It seems like the kaiju itself stops, but then they figured it was just, random chance that the thing stopped the time that he did it, because it starts moving again on its own. But then Yomogi gets a quick, brief glimpse of what looks like a web of colors, and then this core. It seems like a core inside there, and this core looks awfully familiar to what Chisei is carrying around. This almost like this little wad of white stuff, or like a cotton ball, and it seems to be the core of these things, or at least that's what it's leading us to believe at this point. So even though he kind of panics for a minute, they don't think anything of it, and they move on. And then eventually, of course, when the Knight shows up, they start talking a little bit about the kaiju itself again. So we get another, it seems to be what they believe this whole thing is. So we're getting a perspective we had before, where we had Shizumu was telling them what the kaiju was. From the Knight's perspective, what the kaiju is essentially, yes, they do feed off the emotions of humans, or they're bred by the humans, so the humans themselves bring them to existence. But they also claim that the kaiju have a source, and they believe that since they're appearing this frequently, that those sources must be purposely scattered, and they point out the eugenicists and how they could be at fault for this particular situation. But yeah, again, then they mention the fact that the emotions birth and nurture the kaiju themselves. And in reference to the actual kaiju that they have with them, the small, incomplete one, they reference the idea that this thing is incomplete because the source itself is incomplete. So I guess at this point, if we're kind of connecting the two statements together, they're assuming that the kaiju itself is incomplete because the emotions and like I said, the Shizumu was mentioning the idea that they're birthed based off of the restraints that mankind have upon themselves. So if somebody has some kind of issue that's seemingly restraining their purpose, the kaijus are birthed from that. So maybe some type of conflict that's not quite at its peak yet would birth an incomplete kaiju. So interesting, definitely. I am wondering, again, if this is an aspect of mistranslations, because since Shizumu mentioned the idea of them being birthed based off of the restraints that mankind have upon themselves, and ever since then they keep focusing on emotions instead, I'm wondering if, again, it was a mistranslation and now they're going based off of the emotion aspect, or maybe that eventually they'll tie back to the binds aspect that Shizumu initially mentioned. Because like I said, he mentioned binds, he also mentioned them feeding off of emotions. And now here with Knight, they're just specifically mentioning emotions strictly, and nothing to do with the binds that humankind put upon themselves, or that they have upon themselves, that birth the kaiju themselves. Like I said, with Night, they're saying specifically emotions birth them. And like I said, unless I have to go back and double check, Shizumu specified that it was the binds that spawned them. So, interesting. We'll see. We'll see if that's, again, a mistranslation, or if it's just evolving, or maybe something they'll tie back to that at some point. So, one of the odd things that I'm kind of starting to note right now is Mujina and Onja. And I thought it was just a kind of a thing where she just got a personality and she's starting to be goofy now. But now they're starting to point out how Mujina and Onja are so kind of alike now. This entire episode, the entire eugenicist group are running around doing goofy things, going to a kind of a play building and playing all these different games. And the entire time, Mujina and Onja are like literally in sync. They're just two goofballs having too much fun together. And I'm starting to wonder if this is, again, just maybe overthinking it. Maybe Mujina is just, she's now being goofy and now she's got a personality and now they're having fun together. Or if it has something to do with them linking to the kaiju together. Think like Pacific Rim, if anybody has watched that. This aspect of two people having to become the left and right side of a brain of this machine, syncing together and opening up their entire minds to each other and becoming in sync as one. Maybe that's a similar thing with the Dynazenon aspect, with them linking or domination together, if possibly a bit of Onja spilled into Mujina, or if their minds have become somewhat similar or in sync. Again, might be me overthinking it, but it just seems like they're pointing out this change in her way too much. And like I said, how very in sync the two of them are. I'm wondering if that's an after effect of this system of domination. Does a part of them get lost in, or does a part of them leak back in to their own minds? Again, maybe overthinking it. Maybe something cool to go down the line that we can run into, which would be actually interesting to dive into. So of course the kaiju gets big, starts destroying things. Yume gets stuck in a building at some point, and out of all the buildings, of course, is the one the kaiju jumps onto. Night finds Yomogi and decides, hey, we're gonna work together. So he transforms, turns Yomogi's Dynazenon or Dyna soldier into a gun, and goes to shoot it, but it's in the building that Yume is in, so he's kind of hesitant. He tries to do his instant domination again. It kind of seems to have some kind of effect, and he briefly kind of pauses, but then the thing turns and looks at Yomogi. He panics, shoots at the thing, kills it, and saves Yume, which is, obviously fantastic. We don't want anything to happen to Yume. But it does kind of insinuate this idea that now Yomogi is really starting to get in sync with what the kaiju are. He seemingly turning into what would be a kaiju user, or similar to the eugenicist group. So obviously probably what Juga has seen in him. Maybe that's what the Knight is seeing him now. And now we're seeing him kind of evolve into what possibly could be a kaiju user, and possibly a kaiju sympathizer, which would be the interesting route to kind of take him in. But yeah. And of course, the episode kind of ended on a pretty nasty little cliffhanger. Seemingly, this thing that Chisei has been carrying around is evolving, it's changing, and it now looks like a little dragon. So possibly going to see a dragon coming into existence from Chisei's gathering. I'm curious if it's slowly changing based on her emotions, her insecurities. We had a little brief moment this episode of Koyomi recalling this scene from his childhood with this other girl, the one that he met last episode. And what was in the bag was actually a lot of money, and he ran away from it. It kind of showed him possibly wanting to throw a rock in the same windows that she did. So he's conflicted. Chisei's conflicted. Yomogi's conflicted. We have a lot of confliction happening here, but obviously, maybe a lot of this birth of kaiju is kind of just strictly surrounding this group. But yeah, a lot of really cool moments in this episode. A lot of cool little reveals. Like I said, not really reveals of the kaiju themselves. Just really kind of just confirming what Shizumu said, and just kind of slightly evolving it, not really too much. So we'll see what's coming in the coming episodes, but it's definitely exciting. Definitely enjoying the series so far. Hope you guys enjoyed my impressions of episode 8 of SSSS.DYNAZENON. If you did, please leave a like down below. Comment, let me know what you thought of this episode. Subscribe if you haven't already. Share this video if you can. And I hope you all enjoyed, and y'all take care.